Okay, so we are going to write some Cypress tests for kylecoverly.com. There's a few features on this site, and in the hypothetical refactoring that I'm going to do of it, we want to make sure these things still work when I change the code. So I want to make sure that the page loads. I want to make sure that these links work. I want to make sure that there's a contact form on here. I want, shit, maybe not the best thing to test. We can do it anyway. We want to make sure that we can fill out this form and we get a little message that shows up. So let's talk about how we would do this with my personal favorite testing tool, Cypress. So Cypress is what we call an end-to-end or an integration testing tool. So let's talk about some different ways. When we say testing, testing's like 7 different things. And this is like a very specific part of that. So generally, when you talk about testing, people will talk about the testing pyramid. They'll use different language for some of this stuff, but broadly speaking, call that unit, this integration, and this UI or end to end. And these tests are target different parts of your code. So a unit test is supposed to be more like, if I call this function with this argument, do I get the correct value back? Something like that would be a unit test. Or in object-oriented programming, you might say, if I call this, what is the state of this object? If I call this method on it, does the state change to the thing that I expect it to? That would be a unit test also. We're dealing with some small, hyper-isolated part of the code. And it really does about the same thing that console logging something is probably, or using bybug or binding.pry or something like that. It's just automated. So we say, all right, I will know that this works if what? Well, we've done things where we call binding.pry, and then we like try to call a method, and we see the right thing come back. Or we put something, or you're looking for something in particular to show up in your console log, and that gives you some confidence that you wrote the code correctly. A unit test is just an automated version of that. And if we do it ahead of time, if we try to predict what the outcome should be, and then write code to make the test pass, that's called
test-driven development.
Test-driven development. The tests are driving our code instead of like reacting to our code. So that's at the bottom level. An integration test is supposed to test the interactions between units. So when this object talks to this other object, we presume that they've both been unit tested and work okay on their own. When they collaborate together, do the right things happen? It's still mostly intended to be like what we'll call like a white box test, where we can see inside the app. We're like at the code level. But at some point, we like get above that. We get above the code into more black box territory. Black box test is, I have no fucking clue how this app works, what it's written in. It could be an animation for all I give a shit. Can I interact with it the way that a user would? If I click on this button, does it go to the right page? Does it show me the right thing? That's UI test. You're using the app as a user would. And we can also automate that. I can automate a browser going to a URL and clicking on a thing and verifying that something is in the DOM. Those are UI tests. Cypress is up top at the UI test level. We're automating browsers. We're not really automating code. We're writing the tests with code, but the tests don't see the code at all. They only see the interface. Questions about that?
So then Jest, because you used it during that coding challenge that you did, it's either more along the lines of a unit or an integration.
Yeah, very nice. So we'll say that Jest would be down here. Jest is pretty good at both of these, really. Cypress is more up here. Some other testing tools you might run across. The only like viable competitor to Cypress is way older. If you talk about UI or end-to-end testing, a lot of people will assume that you're talking about Selenium. Selenium is all Java-based. And it has some upsides. There's still some things that like Selenium is pretty damn good at. And Cypress is not yet. Like one of those is cross-browser testing. Cypress has been Chrome only up until this year, and it just added Firefox support. Selenium will work with any browser. But oh my God, it's so much nicer to write Cypress tests than Selenium tests. But all of those kind of belong up here. Down in unit and integration test land, Jest is kind of like king of the castle for JavaScript stuff right now. It's made by a Facebook team. It was kind of designed for React, really. But you can use it with just regular old code. And some of that is because it is heavily derived from Mocha and Chai, both of which are unit testing tools. Anybody who's done JavaScript testing in like the previous decade and a half or so probably used Mocha and Chai. But here's the problem. Like once you get seriously into Mocha and Chai, to get them to handle like all the things you need to do with modern apps, like these were written in a time before asynchronous code was as like wildly popular as it is now. And so you have to add 150 fucking plugins to like get these things to work the way that you want. So the design goal of Jest was, they call it zero config. You just set it up and you're done. There's no plugins that you need to set up or anything like that. It's like having Mocha with all the plugins set up for you already. There's some other stuff that kind of exists in this space. Jasmine. Jasmine's a pretty good one. Outside of like the web world, JUnit is like the popular Java one. Hey, we know what the Ruby unit testing tool is, right?
RSpec.
RSpec. RSpec is a Ruby unit testing tool. These all get language specific because we're like calling the functions and stuff. These aren't language specific. These are like browser specific. It's another difference between them. Oh, another, this wasn't like, I guess, strictly a testing tool, but was used in a testing tool for a long time, is Phantom. I think we made you guys install that on day one for no clear reason, because it was abandoned 3 years ago. So it's kind of done for, but it's supposed to be automating your browser like a ghost is controlling it. Anyway, this is kind of our testing landscape. So we're going to do UI tests with Cypress. So we're going to make a folder. I want you to follow along with this. We're going to call it mkdir Kyle website E2E tests, like that. Okay, so I got an empty folder, nothing up this sleeve, nothing up this sleeve. Now we're going to make a blank node project. It's not a node server, but Cypress is a node tool. So we got to have a node setup for this. So we're going to do npm init-y, and that's going to give us a package.json file. We just need that to install Cypress. It's like a gem file. So I want to npm install Cypress. Now, this is one of the things that I am so glad that we're not all on the same Wi-Fi network for, because Cypress is enormous. And so when we all do this on the school Wi-Fi, it brings the building to grinding to a halt. So take a second, get npm install Cypress. And then one more step, this one also can take a while, is you're going to run Cypress open. So we did npm install Cypress, and now we're going to do Cypress open. Oh, sorry, npx Cypress open. Let's go. This looks like your first time using Cypress. Let me install some files and shit for you. Like that. So to help you get started, we generated a shit ton of files for you. And if you just want to see Cypress going, you can click on Run on All Specs, or Run All Specs. And it's going to the Cypress website and running all these tests. So here's my fake browser over on the right. Here's all the different tests. And we're watching them pass. This is all the stuff that a user would do. We can just script it. Let's take a second to get caught up.
Hey, Kyle.
Yep.
Found one low severity vulnerability.
Don't worry about it.
So don't run the npm audit fix to worry about it.
You can if you want to, but
It's no
I
big
would
deal.
lose sleep if you didn't.
Okay. So what was the second command?
Second command was npx Cypress open.
Thank you.
We done ran all our tests. All right, give me some visual confirmation that you're ready to move on. Give me a thumbs up, okay sign, something like that. Bryce is ready. Logan's ready. Haley's ready. Kyle's ready. I saw.
I'm still installing, but you can keep on going.
We wait a little bit. How you doing, Chris?
I think I'm good. Thanks.
All right. So next thing, you can close out of that if you had it open. Close out of all this. Should give you your terminal back. All right, so let's take a look at what we got. All of a sudden, we have this kind of full folder. So we have the Cypress folder. We have all these node modules that got installed. We have this empty Cypress JSON file. So what we want to do is all those tests that we just ran, those are in the Cypress integration examples folder. These are all the tests. One of these days, like, you might want to hop in here and just get some inspiration for how you can write tests. But for today, we're going to go into that folder, or sorry, we're going to go right above that into this integration folder, and we're just going to get rid of the examples folder. Like that. So now I should have nothing in the integration folder. And we're going to throw this all in one spec file. We'll say touch website.spec.js, like that. So now I should have something like that. I'm in this folder, Cypress/integration, and I made an empty file called website.spec.js. Now.
Hey, Kyle,
Yep.
my terminal says opening Cypress, and it's just stuck there.
It might take a while.
Okay.
That's usually the slowest part of the install process. So come on, where's my mouse? There we go. Went to Cypress. And we killed off the examples folder, and we added website.spec.js. All right, so we want to do two things. We want two terminals for this. So one of them is going to run our tests, and the other one we're going to write test files with. So for the one that's running our tests, you want to be in the root of your folder, although I think it technically doesn't matter. And run npx cypress open again. And then that terminal just gets tied up with running that. It doesn't take as long the second time. Hey, and I see my test there. That's pretty cool. And over in the editor, I've got this. So what we can do is we can say run all specs again, and let's go, you don't have any tests. It's true, I don't. So we can write our first test. Easiest test to write is one that asserts true is true. So the way we do that, right, describe kylecoverley.com. And we're going to pass in an anonymous function. And then we're going to, actually shoot, yeah, we'll keep that. I'll say it works. Pass in an anonymous function to that. And then we're going to say expect true. That work? to be there we go. So make your spec look like mine, and then watch it turn green over on the right here. Cool. Give me a thumbs up if we got a green check mark. Cool. Haley's good. Kyle's good. If you don't have a green check mark, let's help. Where are you stuck?
Kyle, mine's still saying opening Cypress.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
You can kill it in your terminal if you Control C. That should kill that entire thing. Then you can try it again. So I'm going to leave that one there. I'm going to copy it. Check out what happens in this little hierarchy. If we're trying to figure out what describe and it do, it's just this. There's no functional thing that they do. They're just for organizing your code. And it's supposed to read kind of like a sentence. Describe kylecoverley.com. Well, it works. And then the thing that you put inside there is your evidence that it works. And that's what generates the green check mark. If we did something like that, it gives us that. You can't nest its. You can nest describes all day long. You could say something like, for example, I can make a whole hierarchy of how I want to group these tests together. So let's automate some browser stuff. If I want to assert that my website actually loads instead of just asserting that true equals true, I could do something like sci.visit. This is me telling the browser that I want it to go somewhere, and then giving it a URL. So I can say https kylecoverley.com. Hey, look, it's my website. You can do this with any website you want. You can do it with Google if you want. Now, it's a little rude if it's like somebody who wasn't expecting you to do this, because essentially they're paying for bandwidth for you to fuck around with testing. As you might imagine, you can also like hack people's sites pretty well with this. But there's a sign on the website asking you not to. So who am I to say no to a sign? Cool. So we can go to the website, and that all on its own, that's a test. I know that it loads. I could also assert that like the title is something. Man, was that actually the title? We can assert all kinds of stuff about it. Let's say I want to make sure that this has an H1 that says Kyle Coberly. I can say sci.get, and get takes any CSS selector, like H1, for example. And then to make an assertion about that, I can say that it should, and then this is saying, all right, what should be true? Well, it should have dot text and something like Kyle Coberly. That syntax, like where it's have dot text in one string, it takes a while to get comfortable with that. A reference for it is over on the Cypress.io site. If you go over to docs and references and assertions, this is all of the words that you're allowed to use in that. And then these things called chainable getters, those are meaningless. They don't do anything. So like have is meaningless there. If I leave it off, it does the exact same thing. If I just do that, that also works. By doing that, I make it read like a sentence. That's what all of these do. Those are all the ones we can use, though. All right. To pass? It did pass. So now I can make my it a little bit more descriptive. I can say it has Kyle Coberly in the header. And I always get a little bit nervous anytime I see a test pass, but I haven't ever seen it fail before. So you can even invalidate your test to get rid of a false positive. Does it say that? Fail. So now I have some confidence that that thing does the thing that I expect. And if I change my code, if I'm reading that out of an API or something like that, I know it didn't break. Ask me some questions.
So when you're doing the check with the have dot text, I'm sure there's probably a way to say not have or not, just to make sure you don't have some sort of, if you cleaned up your website, you don't want some old verb in there or something.
Absolutely. So yeah, if there's something that, for example, is only in your testing environments, but is not in your production environments. Yeah, totally works. Have text as an exact match. Another way you can do that is just contains. That'll pass too.
Can you search for the number of instances of a text?
Ah, yes, you can. Oh, see, let me think of how you would do that. Yes, I think what you would do is sci.contains Kyle should have .length 0. See if we can get it to fail. But got 1. So my name shows up once on my page. By the way, this thing that I just did is called a characterization test. It means I intentionally make it fail. I don't even make a guess at what it should be. And then I go, all right, well, I guess there's 1. And look, this is a cool thing in Cypress too. Look, when I hover over that, it even tells me where it is. Oh, this is pretty cool too. Take a look at my little video animation in the background. It remembers where in the video animation it was too. That's pretty cool. So I can say, all right, I do that. And now if my name should only show up once, ta-da! So what I'm going to challenge you to do is we can use just these like very few Cypress tools that we have. See if you can verify that there are 3 navigation links here. You can pull it up on the web. Also, this is a real browser. We can pull up the inspector and shit. So if you want to see what the DOM looks like, we can element inspect, do all that kind of stuff. See if you can assert that there are 3 links there. Go. And then if you think you've got that test, or fuck it, even if you don't, slack it over to me. Show me what you got. Let's see where we're at.
Kyle, do you always have to do the CY visit at the beginning of every test, or is there a way to like?
Oh, what a good question. So let's say, yeah, I want to have another test here. And I have some shared thing where like, all right, I'm doing sci.visit at the beginning of every one of these. What you can do is do before each and then pass a function into that. And that function will run before every single test. So you can refactor those out. That's how you handle shared behavior. You want every it to be completely independent. the order that your it's run in shouldn't matter. So you don't want to have one where you go to the site and another where you assume that you're on the site. You got to recreate the conditions for the test to pass or fail every single time. All right, let's see how we match patterns. Very nice, Haley. Good start, Bryce. Almost, Chris. Careful on the selectors on this. So if I do something like sci.get nav should have length 3, I'm asserting that there are 3 navs in there. So I need the thing that I'm actually going to have more than one of, which is LIs or the thing in the LI or something like that. And that passes. I can say that has 3 navigation links. And so what gets a little bit tricky about this too, I saw some of you targeting the anchor. If I do that, let's see what happens. There's 19 anchors. What the fuck? Why do I have 19 anchors?
Because they're also outside the nav bar.
Oh yeah, they're all over the page. Each one of those counts. So we got to find some way to narrow that down.
Could you do the nav A, so it's only the anchors in the nav?
Passes. Now, here's where this gets tricky. It's a little bit out of scope for today, but you're allowed to have more than one nav on a page. Sub-navs and stuff also count. So you don't want it to be the case that if I add something to the page, no functionality breaks, but my tests break. That's what gets people frustrated with tests. So we can see, all right, is there anything else? What about something that's in ID home and in the header and in the nav? So it's hyper specified, but I can be a little bit more reckless with my code. Or I could say, no, there should only be 3 links in the header, or 4, because I think my name is a link also. Child drama, just a sec. All right, back. So we could say, oh, well, there's only supposed to be 4 links on that. Whatever is semantically true, whatever you're trying to assert about your app, that's what should be in the thing. Now, the best practice for this is a thing called test selectors, because I might also be using these things for any number of other purposes. For example, I am using the ID of home to do JavaScript navigation and stuff with this. All right, well, if I change my JavaScript shit, I also don't want my test to break. I only want it to break if the functionality actually changes. So the cool move on that is to do something like add some kind of indicator to each element that's only for tests. So like for each of these LIs, we could do something like data-test-navigation link. And if I put that on each of those LIs, then I can just count up how many things have that data attribute. That's the pro way to do it. But when you're just learning testing, be aware that that exists, but past that, just get started. Other questions so far?
So when you're doing the sci.get, is that returning you like the node list?
It's more complicated than that. Cypress, probably more than any other JavaScript tool I've ever used, it's the least useful to think about what's happening from a JavaScript standpoint. Think about Cypress as like using JavaScript syntax, but even then only kind of. Like each of these things is asynchronous, even though they don't look asynchronous. We're not doing .thens, we're not doing async await. There is like a ridiculous amount of magic that goes into Cypress being allowed to have the syntax that it does. So it does, get H1 doesn't give me back a node list. It doesn't give me back a node. It gives me back a Cypress wrapper that has a .should function hanging off of it. Like that is like a capital A advanced programming topic, is how the fuck they built this tool. Because like a lot of this stuff is like evil black magic. So just think about it in terms of Cypress, less than just JavaScript.
Can you test a whole site from one thing, or do you test a page at a time?
You want to test a feature. So
Okay.
what is the workflow that somebody would go through? If that involves multiple pages, then it should involve multiple pages.
Okay.
If how somebody got to a place doesn't matter, yeah, well then don't include all the ways that you got there. Just navigate directly to the page you want to be on. If it's important that they be able to click a sequence of links to get somewhere, then that's what you write the test for. A really good rule of thumb for like what should go in these tests is you think about, all right, here's something that I would want to accomplish. If I were just testing this as a developer, I pull it up in a browser, what would I do? Well, I'd scroll until I see this thing, and then I click on it, and then I fill this thing out, and then I hit enter, and then okay, those are all the things that should be in your test. You're just automating that part.
So if you're doing a test on a form and you have Cypress go and put all those inputs in and then submit, it will actually get submitted to your backend and saved?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's real. So to prove it, that's a really good tee up, Haley. We're going to test this form down at the bottom here. So we're going to target each of these inputs. So we can say it has, we're going to say it submits contact information. And so we need to figure out some way to target this. Oh, why isn't it navigating? All right. Annoying. Rude. I'll say sci.get form input. You can probably target it by name or something too. There we are. All right, so, oh, perfect. So it has an ID. That really helps. So I can say something like get contact form, and I want to write something in the input. So I can do something like type, and I can put whatever I want to type in there. Like that. And check it out. If I run that, all right, so it's going through my test suite, and it gets to that third one. Ooh, there's 2 inputs there. Yeah, for the submit also. So I need to tell it that I want the one that's name email. That's name equals email, like that. Hey, look, it typed it. So we've got .type, and we also have .click. You can target some element and then call .click on it, and it will click on it. So your challenge is to do this with your email address, send me some kind of message, and then click on the send button. And this will actually email me something, so I'll know if you did it. Go for it, give it a shot. Ooh, I got one. Hey, look, this Cypress thing actually works. With a reply to BTKen88.
Unforgiving, man. Do not tolerate parental weakness.
Oop, I got another one. It's from L.R. McGuire. I got another one. Hi, Haley. Cool. So here's how it works. All right, so I filled that out in for my email. I'm going to target that message. Now I need to get the button, which is going to be contact form type submit, and click it. Now, before I fire that off, man, there's a whole lot of repetition here. I'm using that contact form ID all over the place. So what we can do, this is another cool Cypress trick. You can get it once and give it an alias like that. And then say, at form, and then dot find like that. Ends up being way more efficient because it doesn't re-get the DOM element every single time. Probably shouldn't have confused you by showing you that, but whatever. YOLO, it's Friday. Something like that. All right, let's see if it works. So if I'm doing this as a test, I probably want to assert that your message was sent. Actually ends up in the DOM. Hey, I just got an inbound message for myself. So I could say something like, I don't give a shit where, that just needs to be on the page somewhere. And one of the magical things Cypress will do is like, that's actually going through the network and stuff. it takes some time for that to show up, but it'll wait for it. Magical. And I got 4 passing tests. So hopefully that wets your whistle for testing a little bit. If this is the thing that you want to geek out on over the break, go through the Cypress guides. That's a really good place to start. What questions do you have?
Is there a way, which I can look into this too, but is there a way, like if you're testing a form so that you don't submit it every time, but you can still test it so that it's not?
Yes. So what we just did was a true end-to-end test. It actually runs through all of the real-life hardware. If I don't want to do that, that makes that more of an integration test. And so what we do is we can fake some things out. And the best way to do that is with a tool called, let's see, is it our proxy? No. Let's go over to the API. Route. So there's a guide on network request here, and the TLDR on it is that you run a command called server, and then you put routes for any network request that you want to intercept. And it's going to listen for any outgoing network request, and then you can stub responses. So you can say, I don't want this to actually hit my real API, but if it were hitting my API and my API were working, then it would give you this response back. And so those end up looking like this. So start up a fake server, and any outbound network request that's a GET request to /user/anything should have an empty array as the response. And you can send back headers, you can send back whatever else you need to. So that's a, so when they're talking about test flake here, that really helps with that, because if we're doing the real stack, your app code, your test will fail if Heroku goes down, if AWS goes down. That's not your code's fault, but it will still show the test is failing. That's what flake is. It'll work sometimes and not, it's flaky. It'll work sometimes and not others. So having a lot of things with faked out servers like that is a good way to prevent test flake. However, at some point, you do want it to actually run through all of the hardware. And hey, if one of those services is down, that's probably worth knowing about. But you can make that a separate test or one test. Like a new testing idea I've been playing around with a lot is a test should only fail for one reason. So like it should fail because that web service is down, or because your code is wrong, but not both. Because like, yeah, that's worth knowing, but probably don't want to tie all of our application tests to that. Great question. Anything else? Going once. Going twice. Sold. Survey's coming out soon. You're very welcome.